Am I on now? Okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments for Thursday, January 17th, 2019. And would you please stand? We need roll call.
Doing the roll call first. Okay. Directors Williams? Here. Hart? Here. Hartman? Here. Adam?
Here.
Levanino?
Here.
Waite?
Here.
Julian?
Here.
Mosby? Here. Perotti? Here. Clark?
Here.
Murillo?
Here.
Sierra?
Here.
And Chair Patino?
Here. Thank you. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Director Sierra?
Ready? Begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning down there in Santa Barbara. So the first order of business is public comment. Do we have any public comment slips?
We have no public comment slips in Santa Barbara.
We have none up here. So next order of business is approval of the consent calendar. And I understand Director Williams needs to recuse himself from item 4M.
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, so I need a motion, or if any directors need an item.
I'll make a motion for the balance of the agenda besides item M, which I am recusing myself from.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item M. And we need a roll call vote.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
We have a request from Caltrans to continue items 4N3 through 8 because there was an issue with the contracts that they want a change to those contracts and they cannot sign them as they are included in your agenda. So we would like to continue items 3 through 8, and if you could include that in your motion, we would put that on the next agenda.
I will amend my motion to continue those items.
Still second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we need any further discussion? Okay, we need a roll call vote.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart? Aye. Hartman? Adam?
Aye.
Levanino? Aye. Wait?
Yes.
Director Wait?
Is your mic on?
It is now. Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti? Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
Okay, I see Mr. Williams is leaving. So can we have a motion to approve item M?
So moved?
Move to approve item 4M.
Is there a second?
A second, Julian.
It's been moved to approve item M for, any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Director Hart? Aye. Hartman? Adam?
Aye.
Levanino? Aye. Wait?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti? Aye. Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Okay, moving on to item 5, the committee appointments for 2019. Mrs. Contreras, can you read that into the record?
Certainly. Item 5, committee appointments for 2018. 5A, appoint one delegate and one alternate to the California Association of Councils of Governments, CalCog. 5B, appoint one delegate and one alternate to the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo Corridor Agency, LOSAN. 5C, appoint one delegate and one alternate to the Coast Rail Coordinating Council. 5D, appoint 3 members and an alternate to serve as SBCAG representatives on the Coastal Express Policy Committee. 5E, appoint 1 member and 1 alternate to the CalVans Board of Directors. And 5F, confirm members to the SBCAG Executive Committee, Chair, Vice Chair, Past Chair, Chair of North County Subregional and South Coast Subregional.
Thank you. And we can do this with one motion, right?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to confirm, we do have one public comment slip, but it's not clear which item it's for. So we just need to confirm that before we move forward.
Okay, that's fine.
Madam Chair, we actually had somebody come in for public comment, and we were just wondering if we could take that now before we move on to the rest of the agenda.
Certainly.
Mr. Mark Shatilla.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Shatillo.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Mark Shatillo, and I wanted to welcome you to the first meeting of 2019, our new SBCAG board, and just underscore the importance of your work to our community. We have, I think, a situation in the county where, as we've seen with greenhouse gas emissions over the past couple of years, that we're seeing increasingly emissions from the transportation sector, and that in a series of issues that are interrelated with land use decisions, with economic decisions, and I think SBCAG and the whole transportation planning process is one that doesn't really experience as much public engagement and involvement as it should. And so I wanted to encourage you as you go ahead to work to engage your constituencies and to recognize that your councils and other board members play really important roles in the decisions that you make on non-transportation issues that affect transportation issues, as well as the myriad of transportation issues that each of you have in your jurisdictions. We've, I think as a community, in some ways kind of let down our disadvantaged communities that really have not been invited, and they're not really a part of the transportation planning process. And very significant issues like the regional growth forecast that your board just approved for 2050 is going to have a very dramatic effect on a number of land use questions that the board, that each of your city councils and all of our jurisdictions are going to be grappling with. So I just wanted to underscore the importance of the work of SBCAG, how much the community really does care about what SBCAG does, and how the community really does want to be involved. And staff has been very generous in making their time available to have conversations and work together, and we very much appreciate that. And I think it's really important as a community that we look hard at these decisions. I think coming up this year, the revisions to the regional transportation plan are something that will be significant. And as we circle back to that issue of greenhouse gas emissions and the very significant challenges that we have based on the fact that, well, the curve needs to be going like this, it is instead going like that. And transportation emissions are the largest sector and the largest culprit. So we look forward to a partnership with the various organizations that I represent and the other community organizations that are actively engaged in transportation issues, working with your board, working with your staff, and trying to come up with a bright future for our county and each of our cities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So moving on then to item number 5.
Oh, and Madam Chair,
it's been read. Yes.
Since the comment addresses the regional forecast, I just wanted to say that the point is well taken. Hopefully the forecast illustrates the fact that if we do not address housing for working people in our area, then we are really failing our constituents, and we're furthermore increasing vehicle miles traveled that really you know, some of the irony here is in our fervency to protect the environment from growth, that we've unwittingly created a lot of leapfrog development that has driven up greenhouse gas emissions and destroyed our environment. And that's not to say that all housing is good. Obviously, if we approve housing in the wrong places, we could further increase VMT. But housing at the right income level and the right distance from jobs is one of the only tools that we have to address VMT. And so I think the point is well taken. If we're really going to protect our environment, we are going to have a more nuanced strategy than we had for the past 40 years, for the next 40 years.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Sierra.
Getting back to agenda item 5.
Yes.
I would very much like to continue as the CalCog delegate.
Okay, thank you.
If there's anybody else out there, I'd like that.
And so, and the alternate, Mr. Mosby, you have been the alternate. Are you still interested in doing that?
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, moving right down to Losan.
Madam Chair,
And, yes,
it's Director Murillo.
Director Murillo.
Thank you. I'm the alternate, and I'm willing to stay as the alternate, but not go to the primary, as I want to be the primary for the Coast Rail Coordinating Council. And I've been elected the chair of the South Coast Sub-Regional Committee, which puts me on the executive committee. So I think I'll be busy enough, and inviting someone else to take the lead on Losan, perhaps Director Hart. So there, thank you. That's one ladder I don't want to climb.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair,
Thank you, Director Murillo.
this is Director Hart.
Director Hart, your hat has been thrown in the ring by Director Murillo.
And I will grab the hat. So thank you very much for that, Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. And so then, Director Murillo, you want to stay on the Coast Rail Coordinating Council, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So then the Coastal Express Policy Committee. We have 3 members and 1 alternate.
I'm a member. I would love to continue in that capacity, if it pleases the board.
And
Madam
this
Chair.
is, Director Williams?
That's right. That was me.
Yes, Director Murillo?
Yes, I'd like to stay on that committee as well.
Okay. And I had Director Clark as an alternate. Is he there? I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay.
It's a real tough
That's okay
commute
with
for
you,
Director
Dr. Clark?
Clark, since he just has to walk down the hallway to attend the meetings.
Okay.
Madam Chair, is there a need for one more?
Yes, there is.
I would,
Because Director Wolf is no longer with us, yes.
I would like to do it.
And that is?
Director Parodi.
Okay. Parodi, okay. Thank you, we've got that. And then on the Executive Committee. So the Executive Committee is Patino, got Hartman twice, and then that would be Hart, is that correct?
Yes.
And then do we need one more or two more?
I'll be on that since I'm the chair of the Subregional South Coast.
You're
ma'am.
South Coast, okay, that's
Yes, ma'am.
Murillo. So it's Patino, Murillo, Hartman, and Hart. Because Hartman is the chair of the North Subregional.
Madam Chair, if you would like, you can appoint another director to serve in, because we have a duplicate with the chair of the subregional.
Yes.
So if anybody wants to be part of the executive committee, they would need to let the chair know now.
Director Parodi, would you?
I would.
May I nominate you?
I would. Very much.
Okay. We've got that. And then the Calvans. We have, Mr. Richardson is gone, and we have alternate Hartman. So do we need another person?
Madam Chair, this is Julian, and I wouldn't mind being an alternate or the member.
Okay. Why don't we put you as a member? Yes. Is that okay, Director Hartman?
Yes, very enthusiastic about that.
I thought you would be. Okay, we have that complete.
Madam Chair, Mayor Patino, if we could
Yes,
go back to the
Director
Coast
Maria.
Rail, thank you, the Coast Rail Coordinating Council, we don't have an alternate yet. And it's a nice assignment looking out for rail service on the Central Coast, if someone would like to be an alternate.
Okay.
Seeing none, I will step forward to fill the gap.
That was Director
Okay,
Williams.
that's Director Williams, right? Okay. Okay, we've got it. Do you have?
If it's overly verbose language, it's probably me. So, you go.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Then do you have all that, Ms. Kern?
Yes, we have it down.
Oh, okay, so I think we're all complete, so I need a motion and a second.
Could we, excuse me for jumping in here, Director Patino, could we have you just read it so we're clear and then we can just say we support that?
Certainly. Board has nominated Director Hart as the primary member and Director Murillo for Lausanne as the alternate. For CalCog is Director Sierra, and the alternate is Director Mosby. For the Coastal Rail Coordinating Committee, or Council, excuse me, Director Murillo as the primary and Director Williams is the alternate. For Coastal Express is Director Williams, Director Murillo, Director Parodi as primary, and Director Clark as the alternate. For Calvans, I have Director Julian as the primary and Director Hartman as alternate. The Executive Committee, I have Director Patino, Director Hart, Director Hartman, Director Murillo, and Director Parodi. Is that it?
Yes.
So I move
Okay.
that slate.
Second.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Hartman and second by Director Adam. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart?
Aye.
Hartman? Adam?
Aye.
Levanino?
Aye.
Waite?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. Item number 6 is the state legislative platform. Ms. Contreras, can you read that into the record?
Certainly. Item 6, State Legislative Platform. 6A, receive report from SBCAG state lobbyist Gus Corey of Corey Consulting and approve state legislative platform for 2019. 6B, appoint an SBCAG delegate to attend Central Coast Coalition Sacramento Lobby Day event.
Okay, and Mr. Kochek, you'll be giving the staff report on that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Directors. Sarkis Kochek, Director of Programming for the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. Nice to see you all. Today we are very excited to present to you our draft state legislative platform for 2019. Joining us today is the best lobbyist in the state of California, Mr. Gus Corey, with Corey Consulting, and he's joined by Ms. Janie Bauer, also with Corey Consulting. Mr. Corey has been our lobbyist for a few years now, and he is our voice and ears in Sacramento. He has been instrumental on many fronts, both at the state level and including with our agency. He played a critical part with the passage of Senate Bill 1, which created new funding programs for California, and he also played a big part with us being able to secure over $400 million in state funding for our US 101 HOV corridor. So we are very happy and lucky to have him on our team. Our legislative platform allows us to advocate for SBCAG and our regional priorities in Sacramento. We will be joining Mr. Corey as well as our Central Coast Coalition peers, which are all the 5 Central Coast counties in District 5 in our annual lobby day in Sacramento. So that will be happening on March 20th. We will be meeting with our state legislators as well as with our colleagues at the state leadership level at the California Transportation Commission and et cetera. So this is going to be an important trip for us. With a new year and a new term in governor, we do have a new governor, and that's Governor Gavin Newsom. We look forward to building upon our momentum from SB1, as well as advocate for our regional and local priorities. One thing that Mr. Corey will be going over today, which is fairly recent, is the governor did release his draft budget for 2019-20. There is a reference in the budget with linking housing to transportation, which is new and something that we will be working with the state on in 2019 and moving forward. With that, included in the staff report is the legislative platform, a summary of the platform, and a memo from Mr. Corey. He will be going over recent activities at the state level, talking about our legislative day, and as well as highlight the state budget. With that, that concludes staff's presentation, and I can take any questions before we hand it over to Mr. Corey.
Any questions? Hearing none.
Okay.
Then Mr. Corey.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Directors. Gus Corey, Principal at Corey Consulting. Pleasure to be here. Happy New Year, if that's still applicable. Congratulations to the new directors. Look forward to working with many of you, some in a new capacity. I thought I'd provide a little bit of context before we get into the actual planks in the legislative platform for your consideration. If 2017 was a statement in passing a generational opportunity of SB1, a $5.2 billion ongoing funding plan, 2018 provided the exclamation point, if you will, with the voter approval of Proposition 69, which constitutionally protects some of the new revenue that SB1 brings to the table, namely the vehicle registration fee, which funds many of the competitive programs, and the sales tax on diesel, which is the primary revenue source for public transit operations and capital actually as well. 2019 provides a little bit of a question mark, if you will, and I'll tell you why. After the defeat of Prop 6, I think some of us had a sigh of relief because we felt that the hard work that transpired in 2017 was going to be sustained. And however, we have a new governorship, and I think as Mr. Kochek had pointed out, there is some question as far as, even though the voters have on repeated occasions have said, we want transportation dollars to go for transportation purposes, there is a potential threat to have those funds diverted through the governor's budget. And so just very quickly, I think most of you are very familiar with the results in November. It was a clean sweep statewide for all the constitutional offices by Democrats. It's now in Sacramento, it's what I refer to as an uber majority, and that's because 75% of the legislature is now has Democratic representation, or representation by the Democratic Party, I should say. There are 60 Democrats in the state assembly. That's 6 more than the 54 that's required for a 2/3 vote requirement to pass taxes or put constitutional amendments on the ballot. There are 30 senators in the state Senate as well. That's 3 more than the 27 that's required there. And so it will be an interesting dynamic because while folks have been contemplating the role of Republicans in Sacramento, it's actually going to be interesting to see the interplay between the Democratic Party itself and how decisions are being made. The budget, for all intents and purposes, is really a majority vote item, but there are some other discussions that occur and objectives, and especially when you have a flush general fund. The governor, when he released his budget on January 10th, had identified a $144 billion general fund expenditure plan, if you will. That's a $6 billion increase over last year. We had already met our Prop 2 obligation, meaning the rainy day fund is fully funded at $15.3 billion. And we had another $21.4 billion come into state coffers on top of that. And so what the governor is proposing to do is maintain the prudent approach that Governor Brown had of paying down the so-called wall of debt, addressing our pension obligations to try and limit our liability there by $14 billion, make sure that our commitments to schools are maintained through the Prop 98 guarantee. But it is alarming to come back after so many worked so hard, particularly many folks in this room, to think that there could be a potential threat to diverting transportation funding. And that's the speaker under public comment had touched on something which is critically important, and that is there does need to be more coordination across all sectors to truly try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But the approach in Sacramento has really been more of a silo approach. You have folks that are passionate and compelled to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You have folks in the transportation sector, much like yourselves, that really have a fiduciary responsibility to your constituency of delivering on the expenditure plan defined in Measure A, and trying to leverage those dollars against state dollars to really take care of state assets to address congestion management, provide multimodal options for your constituencies. But the one thing that's not being discussed is jobs and where those jobs are located. And so I think if you polled most of your constituents, if they had a preference of actually working and living in Santa Barbara, they'd probably opt to do that instead of having to drive down to the LA Basin or go elsewhere. The same can be said in other regions in the state, such as the Central Valley. And so the hope is that while the governor has not identified a source of funding that they want to hold as a carrot and stick, if you will, it is concerning given just, again, how much has gone into those efforts. And so with that context, jumping into your legislative platform, and mind you, this was published prior to the governor's release of the FY 1920 state budget. And so I think I'd like to ask for a small but significant amendment to this. But number one, we were wildly successful in acquiring funding through the SB1 competitive program for Cycle 1. And truly, a lot of that is really attributable to your wonderful staff and the confidence that your board has had in us to conduct our work in Sacramento. And, you know, Sarkis was overly generous with calling me the best lobbyist, but I truly believe this is probably the best organization in the state because Director Kern, at the drop of a hat, has always been available to go to Sacramento. Mr. Kochek, Mr. Spalding, Director Hart, you know, serving in his previous capacity, it didn't matter. And we have a small delegation, and so some folks might think, hey, we only have 2 people. But their tenacity and diligence and level of communication to make sure that we were relevant in the conversation yielded some pretty substantial results. And so as a result, we acquired over $431 million between the competitive programs, funding through Caltrans. Our partnership with Caltrans was critical, and having the 101 identified really as the second highest priority in the state for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. We were able to retime the Lausanne train service to provide peak hour service through the city of Goleta. That doesn't happen without a lot of the partnerships that we have. And again, I think it's something that I'm incredibly proud to have been a part of, and it really means a lot to be able to continue that relationship with this board. And so I want to be able to build on those efforts and continue to coordinate with Caltrans to see if we can complete the job of getting Phase 2 funded up through sections D and E on the 101. And so we'll be working collaboratively there in addition to our partners along the Central Coast to see what we can acquire. There will be some challenges, and that's because for Cycle 1, the Transportation Commission had actually allocated a larger apportionment for Cycle 1. It was a 4-year, $1 billion programming cycle. For Cycle 2, there's really an additional $500 million of capacity. And that doesn't mean that there's less money coming in. It's just they planned it out for a couple more years to try to get as much funded in advance as possible. But we're going to have a lot more competition because folks that weren't ready in Cycle 1 are going to come swinging in Cycle 2. And so I think I take solace in the fact that we've built a pretty solid case for continuing the investments here. And again, I think our relationship with the administration, District 5 in particular, has been outstanding. And so I have every confidence that we will be successful moving forward. And that doesn't count, by the way. We talk a lot about the work on the highways, but with SB1 providing so much for local streets and roads, we were also just nominated through the staff recommendations in December by the Commission to receive several awards through the Active Transportation Program. And that's not by accident. I mean, that's a statewide program that doesn't have very much capacity, and we had several projects that were being recommended. And so it just shows the level of coordination that we have with the Commission, with their staff. And so that, to me, was my #1 priority before the governor's budget came out. Number 2 is just an acknowledgement about our coordination with our partners along the Central Coast. A big reason why we did get the award is because we spoke with one voice, and we were able to get the entire 5-county coalition to say, whatever money we get from the trade corridor pot, we're willing to dedicate to Santa Barbara so that they can check the box on getting their project funded. And so that spoke volumes. I think it was really impressive to the Transportation Commission that we had that level of coordination that doesn't typically occur in other parts of the state. Number 3, there was legislation last year by the Stanislaus Council of Governments, which looked to provide relief for transit operators in meeting their fare box recovery requirement. It's been more challenging for several jurisdictions across the country, if you will. Transit ridership is actually down in 31 jurisdictions, metropolitan areas across the country. The emergence of the transportation network companies such as Uber and Lyft have taken some choice riders away from the system. So that leaves some of the most vulnerable people, disabled school children that still have to rely on public transportation to get to and from. And so the California Transit Association is going to actually be hosting a task force, which I will be participating on. And we're going to pay close attention to see if we can find additional efficiencies so that we can maintain, if not expand, service here in the county on your behalf. Item number 4, and this is the portion that I would like to amend, and this was sort of an emerging opportunity / threat, if you will. about the need to really pay attention to what we're doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so, per legislation that was passed 2 years ago, the California Transportation Commission coordinates at least twice a year with the California Air Resources Board on seeing if there could be more of a synergy in creating policy that looks at how we're awarding transportation dollars to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's uncharted territory in a sense, because I don't think there's a full appreciation for what a metropolitan planning organization really does and what our confined roles are. And again, being a self-help county here in Santa Barbara, again, we have a fiduciary responsibility to deliver on our expenditure plan. And that doesn't mean that you can't do other things in the various capacities, the other hats that you wear, if you will. But, you know, for SBCAG in general, it's something to pay attention to, because we've made certain commitments and I think we need to deliver on those commitments. And so there's nothing necessarily eminent here, but there was a report that came out pursuant to Senate Bill 150, and it was somewhat critical. It said that MPOs should be doing more to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, even though the ARB acknowledges that we've met our 2020 climate targets. But it's forecasting into the future and saying that we still need to do more if we intend to build on that progress. And so the portion that I would like to amend into this section is being mindful of the governor's proposal. I think the way that I would word it is to oppose any threat to divert transportation revenue, but coordinate with statewide organizations such as CalCog, such as the Self-Help Counties Coalition, to look at additional alternatives as far as how we can plan to accommodate for the various state mandates that we have to comply with. And so something that general would give us flexibility to engage in the conversation and then allow you and other stakeholders to make decisions that could achieve these goals. Two more, just very quickly, on passenger rail, we were clearly successful in getting the Lausanne service retimed, and we were successful in trying to acquire funding through state grant funding through the California State Transportation Agency for capital improvements through TIRCIP. Director? Oh, no? Okay. So it's just continuing our relationship there. We actually have a fantastic relationship with agency staff. As you may recall, Secretary Andis was down for the ribbon cutting when we did when we had the ceremony here. And so we're on the map, and I just want to continue to build on that momentum. And last but not least, we've had somewhat of an issue with acquiring funding through cap and trade, because we don't, under Cal EnviroScreen, we just don't have as many disadvantaged communities as other regions in the state. Predominantly the Central Valley and LA tend to do the best with getting the ATP awards, with getting low carbon transit operations program dollars also that helps supplement bus and light rail operations for others in the state. And so what we would want is some flexibility, because those dollars are so hard to come by. It's to allow you the flexibility to make investments that don't just benefit the specific disadvantaged community, but provide a benefit to the region as a whole. Because chances are folks that live in that disadvantaged community still have to go elsewhere, to their place of employment, to their school, to wherever life is taking them. And so this is actually an issue that's been brought up by several RTPAs across the state, and so we want to be able to coordinate on that effort going forward. So I know I said a lot, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I ask for your adoption of the platform. So I'll stop right there before I talk about our State Legislative Advocacy Day.
Any questions of Mr. Corey?
I'll jump in if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Sure. That's Director Williams, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that the tack on cap and trade funds really needs to be about making our case for our own disadvantaged communities. It is only an accident of the way that EnviroScreen is done that means that our disadvantaged communities don't show up. It's because our disadvantaged communities live right next to communities that aren't disadvantaged. That doesn't take away really from the poverty that Santa Barbara County residents experience. In fact, the fact that they shop at some of the same stores as richer communities actually makes their, and competes with those richer communities for the housing market, actually makes their poverty deeper. And all you have to do is really compare median income of Santa Barbara County versus LA County, which itself has a decent amount, a terrible amount of poverty, but our median income is substantially lower than LA County. And it's particularly acute in Lompoc, in parts of Santa Maria, in the Lower East Side of Santa Barbara, in pockets of Carpinteria even. And, you know, to me, we need to make the case that there's a lot of disadvantaged communities that Cal EnviroScreen just that is completely invisible to Cal EnviroScreen, simply based on how large the concentration is and how close it is to richer communities. I agree with the statement that MPOs need to do more on climate change. I mean, we are the housing planning organization. We do look at the regional needs assessment. We do guide some of the transportation dollars. So in a community that Santa Barbara County is falling short in comparison to other communities in terms of our GHG reductions, the irony is, you know, this is probably a community that values it more than most, and yet communities that value the environment much less than us are doing a lot better on reducing emissions. And, you know, I think that should make us far more open to doing more. That's not to say that I maybe agree with where the strategy is going right now, and so I agree with your strategy of trying to look at other incentives to address housing in a climate change reducing capacity, or addressing transportation in a climate change reducing capacity.
Madam Chair, I had a question too. Do you have any more insight?
Yes, Director Hart.
Thank you. Do you have any more insight into what the governor specifically is looking to achieve with the connection of housing and transportation funding? You know, there isn't a lot of detail. You described it as such. Are there folks who are thinking about what the range of options and what that might look like and mean to a regional transportation agency in particular? We have authority over the regional transportation plan. We have the regional housing needs process. Those do connect land use and transportation, but very indirectly. The local governments themselves have decisions about housing projects that are approved or not. So making that nexus through a regional transportation agency from a funding risk is a very indirect way to address that issue.
So in the governor's budget, while he doesn't have the so-called solution, there are substantial paragraphs that suggest that local jurisdictions could be doing more to actually zone for affordable housing, and that he would like to actually see an increase or an adjustment to the RHNA numbers. So that's part of the longer term strategy. What's sort of missing from that equation is who's going to build the housing, and is it feasible for the builder to come in? And there's been the emergence of nonprofit organizations that are willing to step up, but I think those right now are far and few in between. As far as what's been discussed and what I've seen manifest in other parts of the state, I know that in the Bay Area that there is precedent where the Metropolitan Transportation Commission was talking about withholding STIP dollars for cities that don't meet their RHNA numbers. Local streets and roads funding has been also dangled out there too in certain discussions, but there's nothing definitive. But that's kind of where the governor is coming from. As far as you know, understanding and acknowledging that housing is already expensive and there's high density in some of the metropolitan areas, but it's not just providing affordable housing for people that work. There is also emphasis on creating additional housing for people that are homeless. And so that's another issue that the governor wants to be able to tackle. And so they're large, weighty issues. I think it was almost, for you know, pardon the, it's almost like throwing spaghetti on the wall. There's a problem that he's trying to address. They don't really have a full handle on it, but it was important enough for him to reference, and I think there will be a high degree of engagement that was emphasized and articulated by Secretary Brian Annis, that stakeholders will be invited to provide their input as to how we move forward to try to check the boxes on all these goals.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Of course.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Anyone, any down there at all? Okay, hearing none. Can I have a motion?
Chair Patino?
Yes.
We have one public comments speaker.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mark Chatillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Mark Chatillo. I'm here today. I'll speak on behalf of the Transportation Futures Committee. It's one of the groups that's been involved in transportation issues and is part of the leadership of a coalition of transportation advocates that are starting to coalesce here in Santa Barbara to address a number of the issues. The presentation on state legislative priorities is a great opportunity to kind of frame some of these issues that we're looking at. We actively engaged, the coalition did, Transportation Futures Committee and some of the other groups in defeating Prop 6 because we saw SB 1 as being a critically important source of funding for alternative transportation and really the transportation future. And so we were pleased to be able to be engaged in that and very pleased with the result. And I think it does help shape state transportation policy as we look forward. In our view, the most important priority that shouldn't be number 5, but should be number 1A or 1B is the rail facility. Passenger rail is identified as a separate priority, but recall that the lane and a train was the goal of the 101 in motion process, and indeed that is the only way that we're going to meet our greenhouse gas objectives. And it's clear that the priority both in the state and federal legislative program is on funding the widening. That's fine, but there also needs to be concomitant priority on rail. And the specific objective that I think we need to be looking towards is the acquisition of the 101 right-of-way, the acquisition of the UPRR, Union Pacific's right-of-way from county line to county line. That would open the door for the opportunity of providing commuter service to our North County jurisdictions, as well as overcoming a number of the issues and challenges that we've faced in trying to align the timing of Amtrak and empower the ability to widen that the capacity within that rail alignment and accomplish, I think, some very important goals for our community. So. Commissioners Hart and Murillo, we are 100% behind you. Go and be strong in this process because we really feel that, and I would hope that this would be part of our state and federal legislative priority as well, the acquisition of the Union Pacific right-of-way so that we can facilitate increased passenger rail and commuter rail services. Transportation Development Act is one we've been involved with for a long time. I would ask that as part of that legislative package that there be a commitment to no backsliding of the funding for transit programs that's currently provided by the TDA and the allocations that are there. We don't want to lose that very important. It's an environmental justice statute. It's a civil rights statute, the Transportation Development Act. And with that, we really need to ensure that we don't lose those important funds. Active Transportation Project and alternative transportation projects are, with a bicycle focus, I think needs to be another priority within our package. And then, of course, finally, aggressive action on greenhouse gases. So thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the board and staff, and good luck in Sacramento.
Madam Chair, I had a question for the speaker.
So did I.
Yes, and so did Mr. Adam.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll jump in. The right-of-way acquisition, has that occurred elsewhere?
I'm sorry, could you repeat
Oh,
the question?
the railway right-of-way acquisition. Are there other examples of
yes,
that?
there are. In fact, you know, Metrolink and just further up the Amtrak corridor, up the Union Pacific corridor, in Ventura County, Union Pacific, or may have been Santa Fe, put those alignments up, and they were purchased by the jurisdiction. In fact, SBCAG, or we, the Royal We, had an opportunity at that time to purchase this alignment and this right of way, and did not. Some 15 years ago or so, and unfortunately, so that I think does represent. I'm sure that folks have better history on that, but than I do. But there is precedent. Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Mr. Adam.
Yeah, that pretty much answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from Santa Barbara?
I had one.
Yes.
In seeing what's on here, the 6 items, I noticed we danced around probably one of the biggest items that really was kind of glossed upon, and that is the location of the jobs component. And what happens is a lot of it is the protectionism of the jobs in the South County and isolating the jobs out of the areas where the jobs are needed. As in the Lompoc area, we're short 10,000 jobs. And their powers to be have rezoned and eliminated much of the jobs component, forcing the people in my community to leave at 10,000 approximately a day. We only have 18,000 people who are employed. That's a big percentage. So a lot of this could be cured with, now you're talking about a housing element, but this also needs to be piggybacked with the jobs housing component. And there, in one move, the county eliminated 272 acres of light industrial and commercial around our community of Lompoc, and forcing people to move. Again, you have to be careful with the balance of the affordable housing component. I think it's important to say affordable housing, but it's also housing that is affordable. Because in the case of Lompoc, almost 30% of our multiple family housing units have low income restricted covenants on it. And when you get to that point, you start getting in a deadly spiral. And people keep thinking that the opportunity is to try to redirect more of that to a community that's embracing it. And I challenge the rest of the community, because I think Santa Barbara, maybe 2 or 3% of the multiple family housing units have such restrictive covenant.
Yeah, the Director Hart quoted the right amount. Last recollection I saw was about 15% of the housing stock in Santa Barbara City is price controlled for low-income individuals.
Okay, with a restriction, I appreciate to hear that number, and I'll verify that with my staff, because we're getting different numbers, but Santa Maria is significantly less than that. So it's important that when you look towards directions, that you don't overburden communities, because you end up, again, getting communities in the spiral component. But I think a jobs factor and the location of the jobs is as much important as about anything you see on here. It could reduce the need for having the third lane down here. It could reduce the need of having a train to put people in cattle cars and redirect them from one community to another. Why not keep people as close as they can to their jobs?
And I just add, Madam Chair, that I believe in terms of production, the city of Santa Barbara has done more like 30%, 33% in recent decades of their production has been price controlled. So kudos to current and former city council members of Santa Barbara, because I just think that this is a little bit of a mischaracterization of where South County policymakers are trying to go. In fact, the city of Santa Barbara has had massive restrictions on commercial entities for 3 decades. There's, a lot of some policymakers down here that would love to get rid of some jobs because of that balance. I obviously generally favor more housing as opposed to less jobs as a strategy, but I think you rightly point out that economic development in some parts of the county is a necessary part of the strategy of reducing the jobs housing imbalance.
So, Madam.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Yeah, Director, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Just real quick, just to make sure that I address Director Mosby's points, because they're really important. I attempted under item number 4 to put in some language here to say, at the very tail end of the sentence, it says, and support policies that promote regional job creation and provide for more efficient commute and goods movement travel patterns. So I kind of threw the kitchen sink there. I'm happy to refine that as necessary to make it stronger to further emphasize that point, though, if that's your desire. And I can work with staff on making those changes if needed.
I think my point has been taken, and you have that in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So, Madam Chair, there's just one more item, and that's Part B, that I just briefly want to reference.
Yes, Mr. Corey, go ahead.
So, I've had the privilege of putting together the Central Coast Coalition's Lobby Day this will be the 10th year that we've done it, and I very much have appreciated this board's willingness to participate in those days' activities. I hope that you've found it to be productive and fruitful. I think that it has given us a level of prominence in Sacramento. What I wind up doing is arranging meetings with the 7 legislative delegation members along the Central Coast, and then meeting with folks in the administration. And so it's the California Transportation Commission, Caltrans headquarters. This year, I think I want to put an emphasis on trying to meet with the governor's staff, so the highest level possible, whether it's the legislative secretary or a deputy chief of staff or whomever, to try to get our point across with respect to our priorities. And so you've typically appointed a representative from this body to attend those days' activities, and I would encourage you to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Sierra?
Director, I have the wonderful opportunity of going with Director Kern, Director Bennett, Sarkis, and Gus, and it was incredible. I had such a wonderful time. If nobody else would like to go, I would love to do it again. I really enjoyed meeting with CTC and our representatives and pushing SB1. It was a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready for a motion at this point?
So, Madam Chair, are we identifying somebody at this point? So the motion.
Well, we are. We're going to receive the report and appoint a delegate at this point. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll make the motion. We receive and file, and then since nobody else stepped forward, I think Director Sierra enjoyed it so much, I'd be happy to nominate her as our delegate.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I just have one comment.
Yeah.
Part of the motion as recommended is to approve the state legislative platform, and I believe Mr. Curry had an amendment to that, so I just wanted to clarify whether that's part of the motion.
Yes. Mr. Lavanino?
Absolutely. Whatever Rachel says.
And the second?
Yeah,
Director Waite?
The second was to amend the item number 4?
Yes.
Okay.
The fourth part of 6. That was the amendment, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, yes, my second stands.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Contreras, can you call the roll?
Director Williams? Hart?
Aye.
Hartman? Adam?
Abstain.
Lavanino?
Aye.
Waite?
Yes.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti? Aye. Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino.
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0-1.
Moving on. Oh, thank you. Moving on to item 7, which is a federal legislative agenda. Ms. Contreras, could you please read that into the record?
Item 7, Federal Legislative Agenda. 7A, receive a report from SBCAG's federal lobbyist, Don Gilchrist, on federal transportation issues and approve SBCAG's federal legislative agenda for 2019. 7B, authorize the SBCAG chair, vice chair, and immediate past chair to travel with staff to Washington, D.C.
And Mr. Kocek, you'll be making that presentation?
I'll be introducing, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair,
Thank you.
directors. Today, staff is excited to present our draft legislative platform for 2019. And joining us today is the best legislative advocate in Washington, D.C., Mr. Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates. Mr. Gilchrist has been with us for a few years now, and he is also our voice and ears in Washington, D.C. He has been critical in our advocacy for projects and priorities in our region, and we are looking forward to 2019 and any opportunities there are with potential funding from the federal level. We will be joining Mr. Gilchrist in Washington, D.C. in late March for our legislative platform, which is included in the staff report. One difference I want to note from prior years is that we have actually included innovative financing options as platform priority number 1. As we've presented to the board back in fall of 2018, with our Senate Bill 1 awards for the 101 HOV corridor, we are using Measure A funds as a match for that funding. So we will need a certain amount of funding to act as that match. We are looking at certain financing options. One is the potential need for bonding against Measure A, which would have a major impact on our cash flow for the entire program. But there is an alternative option with innovative financing at the federal level, which is called a TIFIA loan. It's Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. And basically that allows us to not have the burden of bond debt payments like we would if we had to do a bond debt payment. So we made that priority number 1 in our platform this year, along with the other items in our platform. And so with that, I will now hand it over to Mr. Gilchrist. There's obviously a lot going in Washington, D.C. right now, or maybe not a lot, but depending on how you look at it. But Mr. Gilchrist will go ahead and present our platform and our legislative trip. So thank you.
Chair Patino, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak to you this morning. I'm Don Gilchrist with Thomas Walters and Associates, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you about your federal legislative agenda. This discussion does take place in the midst of a partial government shutdown, and I think that highlights the fact that we've had a very challenging and divisive environment in which to lobby in the past year, and we are unfortunately seeing that continue as we move into this year. With that, I wanted to first start by mentioning that we are entering year 4 of the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. That's the 5-year surface transportation bill that authorizes federal highway, transit, rail, and highway safety programs. And this slide shows some of the important elements. The FAST Act provided a 5-year authorization for the highway and the transit formulas and gave us a chance to see those finally start to increase. We had seen flat funding for several years before the FAST Act, so that was significant, and established some of these other opportunities for competing for federal funds, including the restart of the passenger rail funding program, which is something that SBCAG had worked on for years in case it could be helpful for supporting commuter rail in the Central Coast. And finally, about the FAST Act is that it did provide a short-term fix for the Highway Trust Fund by transferring $70 billion from a variety of general fund sources into the trust fund, and that's going to keep it solvent through the 5-year life of the bill. That's the one part of the process. The second part of the process is appropriations, where we seek funding to implement these programs, and unfortunately, we are having a partial government shutdown. The DOT funding bill is one of 7 appropriations bills that has not been signed into law yet. The short-term funding expired on December 21st. I'd like to say that negotiations are underway to fix the problem, but I don't think that's accurate. At this point, the two sides are talking past each other, and so we don't really see any particular end in sight for right now. I don't think it can continue at that, going on like that forever, but we don't see, although there's certain elements that are being talked about that could contribute to resolving the impasse, neither side is giving in at this point. So that means the big issue for us right now is getting the transportation appropriations enacted for fiscal year 2019. This slide shows proposed funding levels from the different versions of the bill last year that are sort of the baseline for negotiations this year. And if you look at the column Trump FY19, that's the president's budget proposal, and you'll see that he proposed fully funding the highway and the transit formulas at the levels that were authorized in the FAST Act. But when we get down to rail grants and the build program grants, he did not support funding for that. Fortunately, the House and Senate versions of the bill are proposing to fund these programs at levels above the president's level, and that's potentially very good news for SBCAG. The DOT bill is not being held up over the dispute, any disputes related to transportation funding. It has to do, of course, with the larger budget issues related to border wall funding. This slide here shows that same information in a slightly different way. These are the amounts of increase proposed in the House and Senate bills for these programs to show how the House and the Senate agreed to add money from the general fund to supplement the FAST Act programs. This came about because of the budget deal in 2018 and a bipartisan agreement that we needed to start to plow more money into transportation infrastructure. So if the underlying issues can be resolved, there's potentially very good news for transportation. I wanted you to be aware of this dynamic because this is a potentially very important success that we'll want to build on as we're leading into the next highway bill reauthorization. This affects the baseline for the debate and negotiations when we go to write that bill. I just listed a few of the issues for 2019. We discussed these a little bit more in our written report, and I can go into greater detail on any of these. But first, we are adding credit assistance to the issues that we're lobbying for SBCAG. This has been a very popular bipartisan program in Congress because it's seen as a way of multiplying the limited federal funding that's available. I don't see any problem with competing for TIFIA funding while you're also competing for whatever federal grants may be available for transportation programs. In fact, that may actually end up strengthening the case that you're making because DOT has often looked at TIFIA support as a way of leveraging the non-federal side of any project. So they may actually give you preference when you apply for federal grants if you go the TIFIA route. It could be a way to help to complete the one-to-one project. It could help you lower your total cost. So we certainly are recommending that you pursue that and investigate that. I do think the infrastructure initiative is going to get a fresh look this year. It's important that this, whatever infrastructure plan is adopted, it's important that it includes new direct federal spending. And we're also arguing that local self-help efforts like Measure A have to get full credit if there's going to be any competition for these funds. I wanted to note that Supervisor Lavanino has been very active working on this issue through the National Association of Counties. I think those efforts dovetail very well with SBCAG's lobbying as a metropolitan planning organization. So we're looking forward to that. Hopefully see some progress this year on that. I listed spending caps because there is a budget deal in place that runs through October. That covers FY18 and FY19, but in October the deal will expire. The spending caps will reset to lower levels unless another budget agreement can be reached. So that's just something we want to keep an eye on. If we don't adjust those spending caps, then it could trigger across-the-board spending cuts through sequestration, which is a very scary word that we do not ever want to see happen. I put climate change down because I think that's going to be an area where we'll see a lot of action in the House this year. Whatever they decide to do, we want to make sure that local transportation efforts are taken into account because transit, rail, HOV lanes can all contribute to reducing the vehicle miles traveled side of the equation and the pollution that comes from traffic congestion. So we're going to keep an eye on that and work with our delegation to take advantage of any bills that are going through Congress. And just finally, the Highway Trust Fund continues to be an issue. It is solvent through the 5-year life of the FAST Act, but it will run out of money in 2022. And so this is just something that we're going to have to keep talking to Congress about to resolve as we think about the next highway bill. It certainly would be unusual for Congress to tackle a tough issue like this before it reaches the absolute crisis stage. but we want to continue to lay the groundwork and hope that we can get some good policies into place. I think the new leadership in the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Peter DeFazio from Oregon, is a name that board members and staff will remember from previous meetings. He's very open to the idea of new revenue sources for the Highway Trust Fund, so we're looking forward to what he may be able to do in Congress this year. So we look forward to working with you and your staff on the agenda that you adopt today. We have recommended meetings for board members and staff in Washington, D.C. in March. That should give us time to get the government reopened. If that doesn't happen, we still have the opportunity to meet with members of Congress because the legislative branch is fully funded. So I guess I'll end there and see if I can answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of Mr. Gilchrist?
I have one, Madam Chair, Director Hartman.
Yes, Director Hartman.
Thank you. The TIFIA, that really gives us something we can sink our teeth into. What's required? I mean, is it a policy, an administrative policy, administrative regulation, or does it really require congressional changing the statute somehow?
So the TIFIA program was originally signed into law, I think, in a previous highway bill. I think it was MAP 21. There's credit authority that's on the books right now waiting to be used, and we just need to go to the Department of Transportation and work through their application process. This could be take the form of a direct loan, or it could be a loan guarantee, but in any case you end up with credit assistance that's at a lower rate than you would get through the private markets. We hope to see the Department of Transportation open soon so we can have those conversations with them. We will certainly be wanting to include that in our meetings in March, but your staff has already started the process of exploring this with DOT, and there's an application process and a vetting that they do for creditworthiness, but there's no congressional action that would be needed once that application process is completed.
So if I might follow up, what I'm reading here is that it's a cumbersome application process. It takes a lot of time. But that doesn't require a policy or rule change. We just need to kind of get our project higher in the queue.
I think we want to start the process as soon as possible, and also continue to work either administratively or congressionally. I think this is a place where Congress may be able to be helpful to streamline that application process to the extent possible. It is slower than the private sector. There's been a lot of effort to make it work faster and work better. I think over time it has improved, but it's still more cumbersome than you would find if you were going through the private bond markets.
Madam Chair, I had a comment to that point too. I think the TIFIA program is a great option as well. You know, we've been pushing very hard for probably nearly 10 years now to try and get some kind of federal grant assistance for the 101 project. And your point that these are not in competition, we can continue to do that, but having this other tool that can get us funding in a different way by saving us money is a great option. But it is concerning that the Department of Transportation is closed because the timing of this is very tight. right. I know, looking at this with Mr. Kachuk, that in the Orange County Transportation Authority's circumstances, they've taken nearly 3 years, I think, to get through this process. And we have some hard and fast deadlines with the California Transportation Commission to deliver our share of the funding to meet those grant obligations at the state level. So having this funding in place in a timely way would really help us. But having the Department of Transportation closed when we have, I think, submitted the application early in December to start this process, but not be able to move that along, it could literally come down to months at the end of this process when we need to have this funding available. So working with our congressional delegation, doing the lobbying work that you're doing back in DC to kind of potentially stream that at the same time we're going through that process could be all the difference in the world between taking advantage of this funding and saving money and having a success story out of this or not. So thank you for being on top of that, and all the staff as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay. We need to authorize, also in a motion, authorize the SBCAG chair, vice chair, and immediate past chair to travel with staff to Washington, D.C. And Margie, that would be myself, Director Patino, vice chair, Director Hart, and immediate past chair, Director Hartman. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. This is Director Lavanino to follow staff recommendation, receiving the report, approving the federal legislative agenda, and then authorizing Directors Patino, Hart, and Hartman to travel to D.C. with staff.
I second that motion.
And I have a second from Director Sierra. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Director Williams?
Aye.
Hart? Aye. Hartman? Aye. Adam?
Aye.
Lavanino?
Aye.
Waite?
Aye.
Julian?
Aye.
Mosby? Aye. Perotti?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Sierra?
Aye.
And Chair Patino.
Aye.
Motion passed 13-0.
Okay. Item number 8, emerging technologies in transportation. Mrs. Contreras, can you read that into the record?
Item 8, emerging technologies in transportation. Receive a presentation on shared mobility devices and vehicles.
Good morning, Chair Patino and directors. I'm Mike Becker of staff. I think this item was originally supposed to come in October, and it kept getting pushed back, and so it's a little bit dated now, but I'll go through it. And I know this is the reason why you're all here today. So here you have the original shared mobility, and times have changed. Here is contemporary hitchhiking. So a while back, I gave you a presentation on emerging technologies in transportation. Today's item's a follow-up to that, and you might recall that I provided an overview of electrification, automation, and sharing. The images on the right are from that presentation. Today, I'll expand on sharing. It is my intent to bring something to you periodically to highlight the changes that we are seeing. Today, I will broadly cover what is shared mobility, the new shared mobility platforms, and hints of what we might expect in the future. Is this shared mobility? Yes. This is the shared mobility that we've known for a long time. It's a publicly backed option. Rental cars are essentially a shared mobility. They're a private option. The shared mobility that we've all had a little bit of experience with lately. Carpooling is without a doubt shared mobility. And here's some of today's shared mobility. These are some of the items that I'll expand on. This is microtransit, bike share, pulled network services, and everybody's favorite, the scooters. So what is the difference between the new mobility options and these? Largely this. The smartphone was launched 11 years ago, and since then we've seen a revolution in transportation. without the smartphone would still be scanning the yellow pages, looking for the local taxi company's phone number. And some of these options, car sharing, which was perhaps the first of the modern shared mobility platforms. And this one's unique in that it started before smartphones. You used to reserve these using a website. Now they're all smartphone based. In this area, we have Zipcar. It charges somewhere in the neighborhood about $9 an hour, all inclusive, your insurance, your fuel, and the rental time, and your miles. And that's much cheaper than owning, maintaining your own car, assuming that your use is on the lower end. If you can walk to work, it's cheaper to do this. The tipping point is somewhere around 10 to 12 hours of use per week, where it would become the balance shifts to it's cheaper to own your own vehicle. And if you are that vehicle-less and relying on Zipcar, if you need a car on the weekend, Zipcar will rent it to you. However, it's probably cheaper just to get a regular rental. Car sharing is here. Zipcar has cars in Isla Vista, Santa Barbara, and at Westmont College. The program has not been a huge success in Santa Barbara. Originally there were 10 cars in the city. Zipcar's pulled 8 of them out, and they do not market the service. I believe Zipcar and car sharing in general is more successful in the bigger markets where there's a denser population and more of a premium on parking. And also with the advent of Uber and Lyft, there may be less value in car sharing now and going forward. The next item is microtransit, which we do not have here, but it's not to say it won't come in the future, which is essentially a cross between your Uber-type service and your typical transit. In San Francisco, where there's several providers, the peak hour ride costs about $5. The services are private, and they go after the high-demand riders, or the high-demand corridors, and the choice riders. Here, this is not the transit map for San Francisco. This is simply the transit map for a private microtransit provider. The service is more dynamic than what we see as a typical transit service. They focus routing on demand and have the ability to adjust routing daily if needed, as demand dictates. They're capturing the choice rider segment, people who are willing to pay a little bit more for a ride that better responds to their needs. There are two types of these services, the dynamic yet fixed route, which is what you see here, and the other is a variable routing system, which essentially would be almost like a Uber that's a bus, where it just runs around picking people up and dropping people off. And you can compare these to airport shuttles. In Santa Barbara, we have the Santa Barbara Airbus, which picks up and drops off at specific locations. But in other areas, there's airport shuttles that will actually come to your door and pick you up at your house. So there's two different types there. What's the difference between these microtransit providers and what we have? I'd say primarily they're profit-driven. They don't have social justice goals. They're trying to make money off the choice riders in the high-demand corridors, perhaps somewhat to the expense of the public transit. The fare is double. At least in San Francisco, the fare is double compared to the public transit. And on top of that, the public transit in San Francisco does offer a limited income individuals a reduced fare. There have been some examples of public transit services providing microtransit services. LA Metro is preparing to launch one. Sacramento Regional Transit deployed a pilot with some level of success. And there are other examples out there. These type of service may be ideal for areas where service is needed, but the demand doesn't, the demand's not there for your regular fixed route. It's either low demand or the population is dispersed. Moving on. So transportation network companies, which are referred to frequently as TNCs, they're your Uber and Lyfts. They're essentially an alternative to a taxi. The primary difference between the first iteration of the TNC and a taxi, it goes back to the smartphone. You book a trip on your phone, you can track the driver coming, you know roughly how much your trip is going to cost, and none of that was available with a taxi. What we are paying attention to now is the shared ride aspect of the TNCs. Take note of the image on the left. It offers 3 options: that Express Pool, or UberX. In our region, we have the UberX is the only one that's currently offered, though it's not to say that we won't see those other options in the future. Uber Pool or Lyft line, which would have been the second option, seeks to combine like trips. So you have several people in a neighborhood that they're separate from each other, but trying to go to roughly the same place. Their software will group them and put them into the same car. So with the pool option, the passengers are rewarded with a lower fare, but the trip may take a little bit longer. There's also, Uber has what's called Express Pool, and Lyft has what they call the shuttle. These services are similar, but may ask a patron to walk a block or 2 at the beginning and end of their trip. Again, it makes it even more cheaper. They offer a flat fee rather than one that's based on distance. And the fee was probably about $1 more than a typical transit ride. In cities where the pool option is available, I recently read that about 40% of people select or that option that they're willing to be pooled with another person. And with the pool options, if demand is good and the services are well run, we could see a future where an Uber or Lyft car is never without a passenger, because it's always picking somebody up or dropping somebody off, and a lot of overlap in the trips. On to bike share. It's another shared mobility alternative. The last time I gave this presentation, I noted that the annual growth is 72% per year in the U.S. of the number of bike share bikes. And the one difference that we are seeing now compared to back then is the death of the docked bike share model, which would be then the provider installs racks which dictate or define the beginning or end of all trips. Now they're similar to what UCSB offers, where they can be parked in areas that are designated or in furniture zones of sidewalks and so forth. Essentially, they don't have to go to a particular provider-owned rack. After a lengthy process, UCSB was the first in the region to offer bike share. Last August, Cycle Hop, which became Hopper, installed 600 bikes on UCSB. Shows how UCSB manages parking of these. The green areas highlight where the bikes are allowed to be parked. These are not green areas on the ground. This is purely just in the app, but you can park them in any of the green areas, which if you zoom out, the campuses in Isla Vista are littered with the parking areas. I believe if you park outside of a green area, I don't think it'll stop you from doing that, but you may be assessed some level of penalty. And here's the price structure for the UCSB system. $60 a year is not a bad deal. A used mid-quality bike costs more than what getting through 4 years of college would cost paying for this service. And there's no maintenance involved. There's no flat tires involved. If you get a flat tire, if it's even possible to get a flat tire on one of these, you just drop it and get another one. Pretty soon, I believe we'll see 1,200 bikes in the area of UCSB and Isla Vista. All right, scooters. When I gave this presentation last time, it was October 2017, I had not even heard of scooter share yet, which highlights the speed of change. A lot of my life now is devoted to scooters. Similar to bike share, the scooters provide a means for short distance commuting. They're dockless, meaning that they can be parked just about anywhere, and as some of you can attest, they are parked just about anywhere. Users may be penalized for parking a scooter against the policy, such as in the middle of the sidewalk. Lime, the company that briefly operated in Santa Barbara and is one of the companies in Isla Vista, charges $1 to start and 15 cents a minute, which that's fairly inexpensive, but if you took it for a while, that equals about $10 an hour. Some of the big companies have jumped into scooters. Uber owns a service called Jump. and is also an investor in Lime. Lyft has their own branded scooters. The other major player is Bird. And I've heard that in Los Angeles, there's about 10 different companies that operate, so there's no shortage of vendors for the scooters. And these companies have grown from being nothing a year and a half ago to being multi-billion-dollar companies now. I will say that these screenshots have came before Goleta acted in early December to get them out of the city. So this is not today or yesterday. So this just highlights the dispersion of the scooters in Isla Vista and previously in the city of Goleta. And I know scooters are being debated right now, and I'd offer only a few comments. Number one, I've read, and there's likely some truth to it, that the only people that don't like them are the people who don't use them. Two, you do see scooters parked at bus stops, which signifies they are satisfying an otherwise unsatisfied need. And three, people on both sides of this issue are very passionate. It should be noted that as technologies improve, a lot of the issues that we see with scooters may be addressed. I say the rate of change is too fast for some. However, if we view the transportation system as a means of moving people and goods rather than cars and trucks, then we should accept that changes are happening. Additionally, shared mobility is perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to remove vehicles from our roads and to reduce congestion. The Santa Barbara City Council previously banned the scooters. In February, I hear that they'll consider next steps on moving forward. The county has permitted them, and the city of Goleta has banned them. So right now we have a mix of local policies on scooters. To try and see what the future might hold, I thought it'd be useful to put these shared mobility alternatives in order, essentially from what might be the longest trip to the shortest. And after sorting them, I've looked for gaps. Many of these services will likely become automated, and I was thinking about if you have an automated Uber and car share, really they're one and the same. But essentially, the gaps are getting narrow. There really aren't any options below scooters. I don't imagine next year I'll be presenting about the rollerblade share or the skateboard share. It could happen, but I don't think we will.
Hoverboards. Hoverboards is next.
Hoverboards, okay. Hoverboards next year. There is potential room above bikes for mopeds, and I believe in Europe there already is some level of moped share. You'll probably see some more public-private partnerships with these between transit and the TNCs to satisfy the first and last mile issues that we see. There's Hyperloop, which would essentially be a private subway type option or rail option, or shared aviation. In this area, we do have Surf Air, but you have to subscribe to it. Perhaps would see something that is open to the casual user rather than as a subscription. So to close this, I just wanted to mention that it's worth talking about social justice with these. All these shared mobility options have one thing in common. They work with a smartphone, and they also typically require a credit card account. And there's a barrier of entry to both of these, which may exclude some from the services. Governments, when they permit these, have the ability to require some social justice aspects be incorporated. For instance, there's examples of facilitating the unbanked and the people without smartphones. And I know Santa Monica and Portland, Oregon both have metrics for their providers that require the devices be dispersed throughout the community and not just around the tourist areas or around where the demand may call for them the most. UCSB provides some bike share scholarships on their campus, but you still need to have a smartphone. Just the point being that as the jurisdictions write the regulations for these, it's one thing worth considering. So that's what I have. I'm happy to take any questions, and I will note that SBCAG is hosting We're facilitating a scooter summit, which will occur on February 28th, and we're currently working on the flyer and the ticketing system, which will be forwarded to you in the not too distant future. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Any questions?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I have a question.
Yes. Director Waite.
Thank you, Mr. Becker, for your presentation. One thing that I noticed was missing from your presentation would be the impact on our law enforcement and statistics of crime, theft of the bicycles and scooters. Has that been looked into, or do you have any statistics available on that yet, or is this too new?
Director Waite, that's a good question. I have not necessarily looked into that. I know that there's certainly been highlighted in the press lately the vandalism for the scooters. I think the County of Santa Barbara, when they approved their fee structure, they did look at using some of the fees for enforcement, I believe. But I have not heard of people stealing them because they are GPS devices and they'd easily be tracked down. But I think there's certainly examples of people putting them in places that they don't belong and vandalizing them. When I come back next time, I can bring some statistics on safety and law enforcement issues.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, Director Murillo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Murillo.
Mr. Becker, I'm also interested in information about people suing cities and jurisdictions related to injuries, scooters, bikes. Do you have that information now? Or when you have your scooter confab, we can maybe then.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Murillo. I will look into that. I know that there's a couple pending lawsuits out there and some class actions. I think just yesterday I was forwarded an article that the city of San Diego is being sued by a bunch of disability advocates for the scooters blocking sidewalks. I'm not sure that anything has been resolved to this point, but I can certainly look into it and we can pass that information on either at the Scooter Summit or another time.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Thank you, Mayor Patino.
Thank you. Hearing no other comments, are there more comments or questions?
Director Hartman, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, Director Hartman.
Two sorts of questions, I guess. The first has to do with microtransit, and the way you described it was largely as a private enterprise. And I'm just, what do you see the future? I mean, does Uber and Lyft suggest that that's going to go out the window or they're going to take that over? And I know that there are increasingly discussions, at least, with transit agencies contracting with microtransit. I think, for example, in the Santa Ynez Valley, there are many elderly people who need dialysis. They need they can't get on public transit. They need somebody to come to their door, maybe take them to Lompoc, bring them back. So I just would like to hear you, first of all, just talk more about microtransit and partnerships in that regard and where you see it possibly going.
I personally see it more as a threat to the typical transit that we see because they're going to poach the choice riders, the people who could drive themselves or they have another means of getting to where they need to go. But if it's a comfortable option that takes them from their front door to the front door where they're going, that's something that they're willing to do. I see that some of the services that we offer, the ADA paratransit services, are almost like a microtransit now. The difference is who they're focusing on, where you have a population that potentially has more needs, where you need somebody to escort you out of your house and help you onto the service, and hold your hand as you get to where you're going, compared to this where they're just seeking profit of able-bodied people. So I don't know if we'll ever see it, if the demand is high enough in our region that we'll see it. What we may see is a public-private partnership where such as what Los Angeles or Sacramento has done, of saying that in the Santa Ynez Valley we have a real transit need, but we don't have the population to support a fixed route, that this is something that we can do and support that would require a government subsidy.
And I had a second question, or maybe a comment and a question, about scooters and bikes and electric assisted bikes and things like that. I know in Isla Vista, UCSB, a key need is to have the ability to go shopping and, and to have baskets or something that you can carry groceries in. And so that's just a note to the scooter bike companies. And then my other question is, what do we know about private-public partnerships? I've said this before, but I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, and that is that these companies are using public infrastructure, tremendous public investment and value, and what are some examples where communities are partnering but getting investment in infrastructure from some of these new scooter and bike companies?
That's a good question, Director Hartman. And I read a lot on this topic. Scooters has been my life lately, trying to organize the scooter events of SBCAG. One thing that just came across my desk was, I know Bird previously, the company Bird previously offered $1 per day per scooter to the jurisdictions as to be used to improve the transportation network for the scooter riders. And I saw that, I believe it was the city of Nashville, Tennessee, had received a couple $100,000 from the scooter operators through this giving money back for the purpose of improving the transportation network. And I also read that Bird took the offer off the table because they were running out of money. I don't know what's happening there, but it seems that as you write the permits, that essentially you can have fees that would enable you to reinvest.
I did have one other comment I learned, if I might just add this. There are now collapsible helmets that are available for about $60. Safety is clearly a major concern, and the law doesn't require these for people over 18, but I'm going to get one.
Excellent.
Any other further comments or questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Becker. Moving on now to 1-minute reports. Well, can we start down there, Mr. Lavanino? We can just go right down the row with any of you who have the 1-minute reports, and then we'll come up here to North County.
Sure. So transportation related, I will be traveling to Washington, D.C. With Mr. McAlpin and Mr. Fayram Tuesday through Friday of next week, and meeting with Don, and hopefully the weather will hold up in D.C. Something will be open.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to congratulate the City of Santa Barbara's Public Works staff who wrote successful grants for the active transportation planning money, just bragging about how wonderful they are. And we're looking forward to improving the undercrossing of State Street under 101, Delavina. Anybody who's driven it, biked it, or walked it knows Delavina needs a lot of help. And congratulations to the county. It looks like MODOC Las Positas is going to have good things happening there too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And on active transportation grants, I'm green with envy. We need to get more planning in North County so we can bring some of that money up there. I just, yesterday we had our first technical committee meeting on the grant for the Santa Ynez Valley, the traffic and safety, and I just wanted to thank Caltrans for helping us thinking that we could get a regional look, and SBCAG for applying, and Mr. Becker did just a fabulous job convening us, and I think we're off and running.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Perotti here. I'm new, and I just want to say to our Public Works as well that we're thrilled that we received an active transportation grant for our San Jose Creek project, bicycle project, and that's an important project to the city of Goleta, and we're just thrilled that we received that grant. And I also want to say that I'm excited to be on this board, and I know I have some big shoes to fill. Michael Bennett's been doing an excellent job representing the city of Goleta, and I look forward to working more closely with my colleagues and learning a whole lot more. And I'm thrilled, excited, but terrified at moments too. So I know I have a lot to learn. Thank you.
Well, like my colleagues, I'm very excited about the MODOC multimodal path in the county. The Gap Closure Project is about a $5.3 million project and is going to create a great Class 1 bike path that connects from the city of Santa Barbara out toward the Goleta Valley, and share Mayor Perotti's enthusiasm for the San Jose Creek Class 1 bike path as well. That's going to be a really big project. This grant funding is really get to the design work done and to get it ready for future grant cycles where the funding can come in large waves to make that project happen.
No report, just a New Year's resolution to try to share with my colleagues in that, you know, our strategies as an MPO will fail if we do not help our transit systems work and maintain a decent amount of service. Historically, our transit systems here have had much better service than our population density would normally dictate. But there are challenges, and those challenges, you know, I think have been articulated well by Mr. Becker. But the other challenge is, of course, that we can all participate in that, and we might be better managers of transportation systems if we actually sometimes use them. So just, you know, I'm making a resolution to use transit more, and I encourage other board members to do that. It's super easy, especially the closer you are in destination and to the State Street Hollister corridor. I mean, it's just really, we have really good service on that corridor, and so challenge and hope to use that train, that Coastal Express, that Line 611 more, because I know we could all do it.
I couldn't do it.
You are a champion of the working class man, and you can do it. Any champion of the working man can do it.
I'm a long way from there. It'd be a long time to get here. Yeah, I want to shout out to Caltrans. Had the opportunity to take the Highway 1 this morning after all the rains and such, and just got to say that smooth driving, smooth riding. You know, I guess there were some incidents earlier in the day, but kudos, it's all cleaned up, good to go. So those of you in South County didn't come, or in North County didn't come this way, everything was okay.
Mr. Julian?
Hi, Madam Chair. Just a quick update on, you know, our DJ Farms project. There's 800 homes that will be built in the next 8 so years. There's about 140 homes that have been built. What's really enthusiastic, we're waiting enthusiastically, is there's 17 acres of commercial. We talked a little bit about where our transportation goes. For about 50% of our people, if not more, go to Santa Maria to shop, and we need to keep them locally. And I thank Mayor Patino for participating in the groundbreaking for the 38-unit farm worker housing that's being built in Guadalupe on 11th Street, and that'll be completed in about 2021, or early 2021. One person in that household has to be a farm worker, and anybody else can participate in it. That'll bring about 200 individuals, housing for about 200 individuals. There's another 14-unit housing development that's going in on a private basis. So we're looking at providing homes for Guadalupe residents, as we're inundated by the strawberries that have been planted across the street, across the county line, where we have quite a few people from Santa Maria accessing Guadalupe to get to the Osa Flaco area. So it's been a problem for us, and hopefully they'll go away with some local housing. Thank you.
And we welcome the people from Guadalupe shopping in Santa Maria,
Yeah,
Mr.
I know you
Julian.
do.
Mr. Clark, I missed you down in Santa Barbara. I'm sorry I overlooked you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't have a report. I think from Cart Maria, we're just happy that the bulk of these recent storms we've been having went either north or south of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Waite.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the City of Solvang, I am pleased to have been able to have our City Council chambers host the North County Sub-Regional Meeting. Of particular interest to me was the Airport Land Use Commission study, where we discussed the plan to develop a plan for the use of land around our regional airports. San Ynez Airport area has been of concern to many residents in that valley, so I'm glad that was discussed. In addition to that, my second comment ties back to items 6 and 8 on today's agenda regarding our state and federal lobbyists. Happy again to be able to host the active transportation meeting where we discussed for the Central Coast area the traffic circulation issues. Thank you, Mike Becker and Caltrans, for a wonderful presentation. Moving forward, we will be doing a tour to study and have people take a look at areas that do need improvement and are of concern in the areas that cover not just the San Ynez Valley, but from Lompoc and other areas as well. Thank you.
Director Sierra.
Alrighty, just a couple for me. We're working to create better safe routes to school. We are painting sharrows on 2nd Street where our elementary and junior high connect, hoping to get more bike riders out there. And I enjoyed being at the kickoff project meeting for the traffic safety study. I wanted to make sure not just to thank CAG, the Caltrans, the county, but the Chumash as well, because without the Chumash there, we might not have gotten the grant. So that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Adam.
I did forget the Chumash.
Director Adam.
No report. Everything's fine.
Wonderful. And from Santa Maria, Director Mosby, I knew that rain or shine, you were going to make it down to Santa Barbara. I, on the other hand, thought that maybe the roads were going to be pretty bad, so I stayed up here in North County. But knowing your tenacity, I knew you would be there when you didn't show up here. The other night at our city council meeting, we accepted and passed the streetscape plan that we'd gotten a grant from Caltrans. And so now with the streetscape plan that we've approved, we will be going on to a traffic study. And again, we'll get an okay for Caltrans. And so everyone's real excited about that. We had a lot of people come out to the meeting and voice their approval of what we had going on there. Next item is item number 10, the Executive Director's Report. Ms. Kim Kern.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. First of all, I want to welcome our new members to their first meeting. I want to congratulate you for being appointed to the SBCAG board. You're joining a great team of elected officials who really care about this region and what we do here at SBCAG. So thank you. Thank you all for being such a great board, and thank you for volunteering to serve at the SBCAG level. On that note, we do provide new members binders of information that is kind of useful. It has the bylaws, it has the rosters, the staff contacts. It's just all-encompassing, trying to introduce the board members to SBCAG. If anybody's interested in a binder, Terry would be happy to prepare one for you. So she's on that. So just give us a call or text or email, whatever works for you, and let us know. I do want to announce that we are having board member training. I've scheduled that to be after your April meeting, so we'll provide lunch. So new or old, it doesn't matter. You can attend the training. It'll be agenda size, so we can have as many board members as we want. A little less formal environment than being at the dais. We'll make it a little you'll be eating lunch and whatnot. So it'll be a fun time. So after the April meeting, which is April, I should have the date on my list here, April 18th. So we'll schedule that around 11 or so it corresponds. And you don't have an air district meeting that afternoon, so you'll be done after that training. And then with the permission of the chair, since we have an executive committee now, I'd like to schedule the first executive committee of the year to be February 13th at 11 a.m. following the North County Subregional. So those folks from the South will have to travel to Sylvain. On that agenda will be to review the proposed budget as required by our ordinance number 5 of the Measure A program. And last but not least, but you need to start the evaluation of your executive director, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to doing. And then we also have are requesting applications for our public information officer and government relations person. So that's posted on our website. So if you have anybody in mind, please send them there. And last but not least, we have our scooter forum, which you have a flyer on your dais. This might change. The flyer wording might change. This is hot off the press this morning, but we are asking for folks to RSVP, so we make sure we have room for those folks that want to be there, and then open it up to the general public after that. So if there aren't any questions, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Curran. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Caltrans District Director's Report. Mr. Gubbins.
Thank you, Chair Patino and directors. And again, as others have said, welcome to the new members. I'm Tim Gubbins. I'm the Caltrans District 5 Director. For any of you who haven't met me, I would love to meet with you and let you know what Caltrans is doing in your particular area. So I may be working on some of those meetings, setting them up. As the biggest thing for Caltrans right now are the storms that are moving up and down the Central Coast. Overnight in San Luis last night, we had over 2 inches of rain in a couple hours. Big Sur has been hammered again. It's holding up right now. But as Director Mosby pointed out, we had crews out all night last night. We had closures down here on Santa Barbara on Route 1. We had some closures on up in San Luis on Route 1 and a couple others throughout. And so I had crews out there cleaning up those roads. And I was happy to say most of the morning commutes were then able to be fully open. We're here about a little over 1 year after the big 1-9 event in this area. And in addition to all the immediate work we had done there, we have a lot of work underway. I'm happy to announce the bridge rails on Olive Mill were finished, and so we're able to restore 2-way traffic across that rather than just the 1-way traffic that we had. And up on Highway 192, the 6 bridges we're working on up there are all moving along and are getting close. We're going to have some staggered openings between about now and May, so we'll have all those open too. We're working very closely with all of your staffs to make sure everyone knows that, and we can work together on that. And with that, I will end my report and open it up to any questions anyone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gubbins. Any questions of Mr. Gubbins? Director Mosby?
Yeah, real quick, the Robinson Bridge, a month or so ago, there was a big accident. It seemed to almost take it out. I mean, I thanked at the sub-regional because the 3-day closure ended up only be a 2-day closure, and I appreciate that. But you can relate anything that happened and how it, almost took the rail out and a bunch of things. But.
Right, yeah, no, there was an accident. I don't know all the details of the accident. I do know that our crews got out there as quick as we could and repaired it, so it's open now and repaired, but I don't know details of the actual accident.
Okay.
No.
And then thank you again for doing it 1 day faster.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Williams?
Probably not a surprise. Just any updates on the timing of 192 bridge completions and openings? I know you have a couple of them open.
Yeah.
Just give me a primer.
Right, and so Toro Canyon, Romero Canyon, some of those, we're looking right about the end of January to get those open. Montecito Creek Bridge has been the hardest and the longest, And that right now we're hoping by the end of May. Security Paving's working on that. We have some of the abutments done and everything else. May be able to move it sooner, but with the walls that we need to do out there and everything else, it's been taking a little longer than we had hoped.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sierra?
Director Govins, I just had a quick question back on the Robinson Bridge again. I was looking at our reports of, excuse me, the bridges that are being repaired in the next couple years. Is Robinson Bridge is still scheduled for about 20 years from now, or where is that on the list?
I think it was a little shorter than that. It was out. It was within our 10-year plan to be working on it. It's not in the immediate, the list of what you see there. And we're working together, and SBCAG staff had worked with us to get some earlier hydraulic studies done so we could get a jump on that. So we are working on it, but it is not quite as far out, though it's not an immediate project coming up.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to committee meetings. Low Sand Pacific Surfliner, Margie Curran.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, Michael Bennett, sorry, went to this meeting, and he's no longer a board member, so I'll give the report. On the agenda, they agreed, they had the approval of the contractor for the optimization study that they're doing. So basically, they're looking at the entire corridor and trying to redo the schedules and whatnot to be the most efficient. So that work will be very interesting to us because it could change the timing of our trains coming to and from Santa Barbara County. So staff will be actively involved in that discussion. Also on the agenda was the performance of the schedule change that they did in April to retime the trains to accommodate our peak hour service request. The ridership and performance of all the runs were discussed and presented. No actions were taken because it was an information-only item, and staff is going to come back to the board probably in another 6 months to review the ridership data. So on that point, I really want to encourage all of our employers in Santa Barbara South Coast to encourage their folks to ride alternative modes of transportation. The train is there for them. We want to keep that train and encourage even more trains to be available for their use, but we have to see the ridership. So please, if you can, adjust your schedules, make it work, and ride the train so we can show our support for alternative modes of transportation. And that's my report on the low sand.
Thank you. On the Coast Rail Coordination Council, Director Murillo.
Thank you so much. We met in Monterey, and the group is getting ready to sign a joint powers agreement, which I asked SBCAG legal counsel to take a look at. I'm always feel better when the attorney gets a look at it. And we were also looking to hire a lobbyist for that agency. And Mr. Shatillo left the room, but I did hear some talk that UP, there's been a culture change there, and that there is talk of selling the corridor that we're interested in. Wow, that sounds like big news, but so maybe that's really just something people are talking about. And so thank you, and I'm pleased to be representing SBCAG in that agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Going on to item 13, communications, Ms. Kern.
If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, there's nothing to add.
Any questions? No questions? Hearing none, we will adjourn this meeting, and the next board meeting will be Thursday, February 21st, beginning at 10 o'clock in Santa Maria. Thank you, and thank you for your indulgence with me up here, and, well, a little over half of you down there. Thank you. We'll see you next month.
You did a great job.